Hi, I'm Michael Killen. We all pay taxes for water, for people who remove the garbage, the refuge, and some other services that help us all in our communities live a comfortable life. I have decided to invite the Assistant Director of Public Works of the City of Palo Alto to come on this program. I want to ask him a series of questions about several issues that are important to all of us. He is Phil Bobel. Phil, thank you for coming on this show. And so you're the Assistant Director of Public Works of that powerful city, Palo Alto.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me.
And before I ask a couple of questions about your background, am I correct, you work in a city where there's always this goal of being a leader?
Right. We believe we are leaders in almost every area. Not the leader nationwide, sometimes the state, sometimes locally, but that's our goal, is to help push out the envelope.
Yes, and I've met officials from other cities in Silicon Valley, San Mateo, and other places, and sooner or later somebody always said, well, that's Palo Alto. You know, they always have to be at the edge. Good. And a little background, how long have you worked at the city of Palo Alto?
28 years.
28 years, that's quite a long time. You've obviously have a lot of accomplishments and you've learned a lot. So I get to ask you a whole lot of questions.
Please.
I have become fascinated with waste management. And I was wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit about it, what's involved in waste management, and then I'm going to come and ask you, what are the three most important aspects or goals a city like Palo Alto is pursuing in the context of waste management? So maybe give us a little picture and then I'll start asking my questions, a little picture of waste management.
Well, probably the most important thing to try to focus on at first is that we don't call it waste management anymore, right? It's zero waste, which goes along with our overarching goal to not have waste, but to reuse everything.
Yeah, that's Palo Alto already.
Yeah.
Waste management isn't enough. It's got to be zero waste.
It's zero. It's zero waste. That's our goal.
All right.
And we're actually made a lot of progress toward it.
Oh,
So we've divided it into kind of three areas. You can compost certain things, organics. So we want to compost as much stuff as we can, the organics. We want to recycle as much stuff as we can. You know, the old-fashioned recycling was bottles and cans. Now we're doing batteries and all kinds of things. And then we hope that the third category gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's the black can that we send off to the landfill. So the goal is to reduce that as much as humanly possible and get everything in either the blue recycling can or the green compost can.
Okay, so you presented three topics, right? Three aspects of waste management. And I think the first one you said is recycling. And how's that going?
Palo Alto, again, is in a leadership role. We've got great participation. We've got a clientele that really wants to do the right thing. So we're kind of blessed with a very educated community that understands. But even so, there's a lot of material that ends up in the black can. That is, not everybody is separating everything by a long shot. So we've got a ways to go.
I was at a dinner party the other night, and one of the guests, I told them I was going to do an interview on waste management, zero waste, and with you, and we focused on recycling. And he and his wife both are very progressive people, very educated, and they said, you know, we really cannot keep it straight in our heads. If this goes here, this goes there, and this goes there. And is that something you experience with other?
It's a very common complaint. I feel strongly that we ought to be trying to simplify this. I keep trying to get our group to simplify it so that the messages are clear, simple. People can quickly know which container to put it in. We're not there yet. It's still more complicated than I want it to be.
Do you have a program to keep furthering the education of the public?
Definitely. I mean, we have our website, we have these mailers, we have stuff we stick in the Palo Alto Weekly, we've got all kinds of methods, the social media outlets. We're using all those techniques to try to, but unfortunately, as you point out, our message is kind of complicated, and we need to simplify it.
Why is it complicated?
Well, because these man-made things are complicated. Let's take a container that your soup stock comes in. It's got a metal liner, then it's got paper, and then it's got wax on the outside. So in our wisdom, we've put materials together in something that are hard to separate. So how do you recycle something that's made up of multiple materials? That's a fundamental problem. So we have to kind of decide, well, can we just recycle this anyway, even though it's not perfect? And we go back and forth on these kind of decisions.
Okay. Now, do you have outreach programs where you have a few employees who are putting on little group sessions on this block or that block? I think your city does that to some extent with energy.
Yeah.
But
and we do it too with the Zero Waste program. We're happy to respond to any request from any group to put a little demonstration on, bring out the things, show them which container. It can be fairly entertaining and fun, and so we have a good time with that. The other thing we have is these zero waste block leaders. So we have about 25 block leaders where they've become the little experts, and they do that same thing.
Oh, they meet with their neighbors,
Yeah.
have little groups, and
Yeah.
yeah, because my wife and I, we sort everything. We do our best.
Thank you.
I'm baffled sometimes. Does it go in the blue? Does it go in the green? Does it go in the black?
Yeah. And there's a movement. San Jose is trying an experiment right now with their commercial people, not their residential people. And they're saying, look, there's just two kinds of things. They're either wet or they're dry. And they call this a wet-dry system. If it's wet, put it in this container, commercial businesses. And if it's dry, put it in this container. It'll be mostly recyclable, the dry stuff, and the other stuff will be mostly compostable. So that's an experiment, and different communities are trying experiments like that. So the dust hasn't all settled on that. We're not sure what is the ideal program of the future.
Is wet primarily organic material, food?
Right. Food and wet paper towels from the kitchen.
Animal waste?
That's where they're kind of caught, and that's why they're just for the moment doing it with the commercial program, is because things like pet waste, diapers, which pretty much just come from the residential sector, female hygiene products, these things are still a dilemma for us. We don't have a good solution. Most compost operators don't want it in the compost, and so we don't have a good solution for that yet.
Okay, now I go for a walk every morning for the most part. And I also want to say with my wife, and we pick up litter.
Good for you.
Later, maybe off camera, I have a street where I would appreciate, where it would be good for the city to do some work. But I also see these multi-dwelling buildings, and I see these big things outside, I forget what you call them, and I can tell the people who live in these buildings are having a difficult time recycling and trying to meet your needs. And what do you first of all, do you agree with that?
It is a struggle. We've identified that as one of the key things we need to work on. We need to work on both the property managers, the people that are supposed to put these containers out and tell the residents what to do, and then the residents themselves who in a big building might not understand what to do or might not be paying attention. So it is definitely the key to our future is figuring out how to sort of organize these multi-unit complexes.
Yeah. So it seems there's two outreaches, one to the building management and the other is to the actual people who live in the building.
Exactly.
It's not easy to reach the building management, more difficult to reach.
Well, especially if we don't have a real cooperative building manager, because we need them to also do some outreach and them to point out when the residents aren't doing it right. And some of them do, some of them don't.
Is there any financial incentive for the building managers to cooperate and work a little harder at this?
So far, we've not penalized or even proposed to penalize people that are really residents. We have recently adopted an ordinance for businesses and institutions to actually first go through a long outreach program with them, but then in the end, if they're still not separating correctly, to actually have a series of fines for the commercial sector. We've not gone that path for the residential sector.
And then we have these restaurants all over the place, and they're generating a lot of waste. You have any special programs for them?
We do. The big thing that they weren't doing a few years ago was composting at all. All of their food waste, wet material, was just going in the garbage. And so as of a couple of years ago, we started a program, starting with the big facilities and starting with the restaurants, of requiring that they have the compost service, that they have a green bin. And now we're at the stage of, okay, pretty much everybody's got a green bin. Now let's make sure you're putting the right stuff in the green bin. So it's a long-ish outreach program, but we are making good progress there. We've gone to a situation where almost all the restaurants are really taking this seriously now.
So a moment ago, we spoke about multi-dwelling buildings, and I was thinking in the context mostly of residents and buildings that are there. But I see buildings going up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-story buildings. These are to a good extent for corporations, maybe for some housing. But do you have any plans to impose building codes that would make it easy for people on every floor to recycle?
You and I have talked about this before, the possibility of having a chute system like they did in the old days, and having multiple chutes for recyclables, garbage, and compost material. We don't have it on our list of things to do to have a new ordinance actually requiring that type of thing. But it may be in our future.
Okay. And then you have landfills, right?
Well, the city's landfill is closed, but our material goes to some of our material, less and less, mercifully, is going to a landfill in south of San Jose.
Okay. And I could be incorrect, but I think I saw a note, or maybe you told me, that the state has a goal of diverting 75% of what all the cities in Palo Alto are sending to the landfill. They want it diverted. In other words, I believe they want less or fewer things going into those Why?
A couple of good reasons, and we want it too, by the way. And good memory, 75% is the right number. That's their goal, and we've already met their goal. We're at 82%, and that means 82% of the stuff that used to go in landfills is now getting basically recycled or composted. So the reason we don't want it in landfills is two big reasons. First, that a couple decades ago, it looked like we were going to fill up the country with piles of garbage everywhere, and everybody became alarmed at the size of these landfills. So part of it's just a land use question of not wanting to devote so much land to landfills. And then the other part of it is wasting materials. Why dig up iron ore that's only got 2%, 3% iron in it when we could have something that's almost pure iron, and here we are throwing it in a landfill? So there's a materials aspect, and I guess there's three reasons. And the third and more recent one is that greenhouse gases, when you put organic material in the landfill, it breaks down, creates methane. Methane has a multiplier 25 times as high as carbon dioxide as far as a greenhouse gas contribution. So we want to decrease the amount of that methane that's produced in landfills.
I'm going to try to summarize, but I may not be able to do this. So recycling has a lot of benefits, okay, and I know it's now getting more difficult to resell the metals, maybe cardboard, I think I've learned from you, is still something, okay. So recycling is important, and reducing the amount of stuff that goes into the landfill for a few reasons. We don't want to use the land for that, and the cradle to grave, you know, use that metal over again. But then you brought up methane, and is methane, reducing the methane emissions, that's fits under the state's plan of trying to reduce greenhouse gases?
It does, it does. And the state would say all three of those reasons you just mentioned are reasons for reducing.
Okay,
land.
my guest has been Phil Bobel. I am Michael Killen.
Thank you, Brad.